Welcome back to another takedown video. We're at the 2019 World Championships in the 60 kilo category where we have Japan versus Bulgaria. Okay, so I'm expecting a big throw here. Let's hit play. We got a minute left in the match. Japan's winning. There it is. There's that big Seoi-Nage. Okay, let's replay this again. Just let this clip kind of finish out. Big explosive, big drive from the Japanese player. Super impressive to see. But again, so just, playing this out, let's just back this up to the beginning and point out where we're at. So the Japanese player is in a right-handed stance. The Bulgarian player here in blue is in a left-handed stance, okay? At the American Judo system and inside US Judo, we always preach, if you're a left-handed player, you stay in your left-handed stance. And that is true for 90% of your judo. We have some circumstances where we encourage players to switch and not to switch, but to be able to just switch randomly left and right, just because, you make yourself vulnerable to attacks like this. And this will kind of explain, hopefully, why we would never change our stance. As we play this through, we're only going to talk about the stance change on the Bulgarian and how it opened up the line that the Japanese player took in order to hit this Seoi-Nage. So right here, we're gripping right here, there. He changed his stance. Just like that. He's already gone from being 50-50 with the Japanese player to 70-30, where he's got a 70% chance of losing, or the Japanese player has a 70% chance of winning. Just because of this stance change, the Bulgarian player's line of opening is this way. If we looked at just the foot direction of his feet, right? Because when you're in a left-handed stance, you're open to the front, but when your left hand is forward and you're in a right-handed stance, your opening is actually to this side over here. Even though his shoulders are looking this way, you can see that his hips and his feet are looking that way, okay? So he's all sorts of backwards right now. And what happens is, as we play this clip forward a little bit right there, he actually turns himself. So now his shoulders are this way, his hips are this way, and his feet are this way, and he's starting to be a right-handed judo player when he started like a left-handed stance, but he's given the Japanese player control over the collar. So the Japanese player has that left shoulder of the Bulgarian, so when he changes his stance, he's actually pulling the Japanese player forward into the Seoi-Nage, adding to the power and adding to the dynamics of the technique. Not necessarily the Japanese player is doing this, okay? The Bulgarian player is actually digging himself into a hole by allowing this to happen instead of keeping his left-handed stance and keeping his position, right? By changing his stance with that grip on the collar, he's pulling the Japanese player into his Seoi-Nage attack, which is coming here pretty soon, right? We took one step. We talk about this a lot in the American Judo system when we're shuffling laterally, okay? When a player takes a step, if you see or sense them about to shuffle again, that is the best time to attack. Okay, as you get better in judo, right, the time it takes for you to realize these positions and these attacks gets less and less. Okay, but when you're starting to develop, when you're at the colored ranks or you're a brown belt or you're a newly promoted black belt, you'll probably realize that turn and the shuffle on the second or third shuffle, okay, which is okay, but the goal is to always bring it down. And you can tell that the Japanese player realizes this because as he's starting to work through the position, right, he went for it, right? If we back this up, that Bulgarian, right here, right there, he's here, he's gonna shuffle once, right there, twice, and Japanese player's like, nope, I'm gonna punish you for that mistake. You've A, changed your stance, and B, you've shuffled in the same direction now twice, I'm gonna throw you. And he does just that. He takes the cross grip, he grabs the sleeve, he drops into the technique, and right here you can see he's pretty much gotten all the way underneath his partner. He's driving that shoulder, and you can see he's starting to explode up from the hips. And the Bulgarian does a good job of trying to be athletic, where instead of going over just smoothly, he tries to explode further along the throat and over-rotate himself so that the Japanese player doesn't get a score. But I'm pretty sure that's going to be scored Wazari for the Japanese player as we look at it. Let's play through again. Yep. So pause, back this up. So part of the thing you want to pay attention to when you're working, right, and you're doing randori is what things are your training partners doing that you can punish. Sometimes, and the more difficult way to do judo is to manually force your partner into situations where you can throw them, right? You make them take a step, you make them take a grip, you make them be in a certain position. But there's also situations like these which require a little bit more feel and experience to the sport, where you recognize situations your partner is putting themselves in that you can use to your advantage. And here the Japanese player has done just that, where he's using this situation where the Bulgarian player started left, changed to right, and shuffled to his left, which leads him into this drop Seoi-Nage, right? One shuffle and we're in. Shuffles, gets all the way underneath, explodes up with the hips. See, right here, what's an important thing to note with the Japanese player, and I see a lot of younger judo players do this, even internationally. They tend to, if we're looking at just the Japanese player's hips, okay? And I try to explain this to people all the time, because a lot of people will take the hip and they'll just drop it because they're focused more on rolling than exploding off the ground. But what we're gonna see from the Japanese player is this foot here is gonna go to work, and he's gonna continue to drive up and at the angle, okay? He's not just gonna let this hip sit to the ground, right? It's rolling, it's rolling, it's rolling, it's rolling. And look at that bridge. You can see the arc. His hip is, yes, rolling over, but it's not just collapsing down into the mat. He's always driving up and through his opponent to finish the technique. A lot of people, when they're starting to learn these drop Seoi-Nages, they tend to just drop their hip to the ground and sit next to their partner instead of driving with their legs, driving through their shoulders, arching over the top in order to get their partner's back flat on the ground. It's just an important thing to note in your own personal development when you're looking at techniques, is to make sure you're doing it through completion. And that can be hard to do when you're just working with a partner doing your nagi komi or your uchi komi, or even throws on a crash pad, because there's not that resistance. But it's important that you practice that final 10% of the throw, which we can see from the Japanese player here, where he's driving off those legs and creating that arch into his partner, right? And then he drives, continues. Look at that back step, still pushing, still pushing, still pushing, pushing until he actually falls off his partner. He's always driving with those legs. Okay, so just a couple of things to just pay attention to when you're doing randori is what types of situations are your training partners putting themselves in that you can capitalize on. Do they shuffle 2 or 3 times too many to the right? Do they shuffle 2 or 3 times to the left? How many times do they put the wrong hand on the gi versus the right hand? Do they switch their stance 1 too many times in a match that you can recognize, so that the next time they do it, you can hit your technique, whether it's something to the back or something to the front, rather than forcing the techniques all of the time. Try to fit them into the movements that your training partners or your competitors already have.